It's time for today's Face-Off on Fox Soul. Challengers Quan LX and Big Angry Adams ready to go blow by blow on those hot topics. Face-Off on Fox Soul starts right now.
And some teams were left on the outside looking in. One of the biggest snubs was West Virginia, who had arguably a stronger resume than North Carolina, the last team to make it into the dance. Now, West Virginia Governor Patrick Morrisey isn't taking the snub lying down. Please listen, gentlemen.
West Virginia deserved to be in the NCAA tournament. This was a miscarriage of justice and robbery at the highest levels. UNC had representation in the room during the selection process. Bubba Cunningham is the athletic director for UNC. He also happens to be the head of the tournament selection committee. Now, it's being reported by a number of outlets that Cunningham had a significant bonus incentive, at least $70,000 to get into the tournament, arguably more if they advanced, with more incentives on the way. Any way you slice it, this thing reeks of corruption.
Mischaracter of justice, corruption, pay incentives. This is a lot. I want to start with our politician, Stephen A. Smith for president. What's your reaction?
This is not a message I approve, number one. In all seriousness, it's embarrassing for an elected official to take the position that he's taken. You know, literally calling for an investigation. You can complain, and he has legitimacy with his complaints, but to go this far and to really try to force an investigation, it's utterly ridiculous. It's childish, and you would like to think our elected officials have something better to do with their time.
In this round, here's Quan LX.
So, Charles, we just watched a video clip of ESPN's First Take, the #1 show on ESPN, Stephen A. Smith show. And he and Shannon Sharp were there discussing a clip or a press conference that was held by the governor of West Virginia, who was very angry and upset that the University of West Virginia was snubbed and not invited to the NCAA tournament. I believe it's 64 teams, I believe it is. But he was angry and felt that there was internal corruption and manipulation of the process to stop West Virginia from being selected, and North Carolina was allowed to enter into the tournament. I, too, agree that North Carolina should not have been invited to the NCAA tournament. Not at all. Maybe the NIT, but not the NCAA tournament. The season that they've had did not warrant nor justify them being invited to the tournament. But at the same time, West Virginia's play this year, even though they had a stronger schedule than North Carolina, there were other teams who also were not invited that I believe had a greater opportunity and chance than West Virginia to be invited. But for the head political figure of West Virginia, the governor, to call and ask the state's attorney general to open and launch an investigation into the NCAA because of corruption at the highest levels of the NCAA is crazy to me, because you mean to tell me in a state where people are overdosing on fentanyl and dying and addicted to methamphetamines, and children being abandoned in empty homes, and children being abandoned and left just by themselves because of drug-addicted parents, where's the ongoing investigation called for by the governor to those agencies that are supposed to help treat those individuals that are not doing it but pocketing majority of the money? Where are the investigations of the quote-unquote miscarriage of justice, as he called it, in West Virginia, when the criminal justice system in West Virginia has always practiced, in my opinion, miscarriages of justice, especially when it came to black folk in West Virginia, because West Virginia is one of the most racist states in the union, in my opinion. But where are the more important issues, the more relevant issues affecting those in West Virginia for the governor to call for an investigation into this, a sporting event, and not those serious issues? I don't know if the man is attempting to get some votes. He's seeking upcoming re-election. I don't know what the hell is going on with this man, but it ain't that serious.
Well, firstly, it is serious. Basketball matters, and basketball matters tremendously to the people of West Virginia and the fan of the West Virginia college, university, that the Mountaineers, who absolutely deserved and earned their spot to be in the tournament. Who didn't earn their spot was UNC. Now, there are always questionable exclusions, right? But here you have what appears to be real corruption. You have the head of the committee being provided a bonus structure from the university he works at that created a significant financial incentive for him to ramrod UNC with their mediocre record, and it just stinks. And we shouldn't shy away from examining or calling out corruption because there are other bad things going on in the world. I mean, top shelf whataboutism. I know you're completely full of crap when you start talking about racism and how horrible the Americans are.
In West Virginia, for sure.
Well, you've been to West Virginia?
I have.
It's a wonderful state.
And I didn't want to get out the bus.
It's somewhat of a poor
I didn't want to get off that tour bus.
But it's a very nice, a beautiful state.
I'm going to tell you what's
and
shocking.
The people living in poverty in West Virginia,
a lot of people,
a lot of white folk.
Hit the nail on the head. A lot of people in America ain't seen poverty like they see white poverty in West Virginia.
Well, Kentucky,
that's poverty on a whole nother level.
The poorest county in America is in Kentucky, and it's 98% white. There are the other poorest county is
I didn't even know white folks was in poverty like that in America until I saw it in West Virginia.
You're too busy hating on white folks. But having said that, look, if there's a questionable decision, and that questionable decision was made by someone or someone who participated in the decision making with undue influence, had a financial incentive to do so, I think we all want it investigated. I think we
he should have excluded himself from the process, period.
This is a not-for-profit public organization in the NCAA tournament, right? And they should be required, okay, to abide by rules and truth. And there's not any credible, Stephen A. Smith and you can both say, oh, well, basically it's dumb for him to have that press conference.
But what about the other teams that were more deserving than West Virginia?
Well,
should they call for an investigation
if we have an investigation and this guy turns out to be behaving in a criminal manner, right?
So then why would the other members on the committee go along with it then? Why would the other members of that voting committee?
We don't know.
Oh, I know why they probably did. If it's true.
Okay. Well, you could see UNC's mid-record.
I'm just saying if it's true, and it appears that there's something nefarious about it, yes. If it's true, it's because of the TV market that North Carolina would bring. Okay. That's why. University of North Carolina basketball is legendary.
Right. And they weren't this year,
but
yes.
TV market that they would bring to the tournament would be the only reason that I would believe that the voting committee would select them because of the financial benefits to the NCAA governing body that they could make from those TV contracts and TV deals.
I think the kids that are playing for the Mountaineers who actually went out there and won more games and accomplished far more than UNC earned the right. Now, I guess there could be argument that there are other similarly situated D1 kids that earn the right. But I think that everyone would agree that West Virginia is better suited to be included than UNC. So the question is,
so why do you think they would do it then? I say TV money.
Well, but if there was corruption, and he was given a financial incentive to bend the rules, then I think we want it exposed. And I applaud the governor for getting out there and sticking up for these kids. Now, just because there's other bad stuff in West Virginia doesn't mean he can do that.
What I don't like about it is, it sounds very nefarious that North Carolina's administrators would offer him a financial incentive to get North Carolina in the tournament, in his contract, knowing his position on the selection committee. That sounds nefarious to me there.
Well, I mean, if you're going to have leadership from the universities participate in that, then they're going to have to participate.
There should be no financial incentive for their vote to get their school in the tournament.
That's my big problem, right? It'd be very easy to say we're going to pay you this and you get paid this no matter what, as opposed to saying, hey, if you manage to get us in this tournament, and like what role, why should he's not the coach, he's obviously not a player, why should he have incentives for their ability to achieve stuff that he should have nothing to do with?
Well, you know why? Because he's the chief and the head of the selection committee.
Right, and that's the problem. And, probably also because he's white, right?
No, ain't no brother of them that get that kind of money.
Hoffman's planned execution has been put on hold by a Baton Rouge judge. Today, that judge will hear arguments on whether the execution method of nitrogen hypoxia violates Hoffman's religious rights.
Yeah, this is the story we've been saying on top of. Hoffman was convicted of the abduction, rape, and murder of Molly Elliott in 1996. Winston Reed is live with more details on these last-minute changes. Winston.
As that Baton Rouge judge will listen to arguments later this morning at 9:30, there will also be a federal court hearing today here in New Orleans at 10:30 as well. Hoffman would be the state's first execution in over 15 years if it is to get underway. Hoffman was scheduled to be executed by the nitrogen hypoxia method. It would be the first of its kind here in Louisiana. However, a Baton Rouge judge did place a restraining order on today's execution, and he will decide whether or not the execution method infringes on Jesse Hoffman's religious rights. Hoffman and his lawyer are.
In this round, here's Charles Big Angry Adams.
So we have this guy, Jesse Hoffman, who kidnapped a woman in 1996, and when he was 18, she was 28. Took her to an ATM, made her withdraw money, which should have been the end of it, right? But instead drove to Tammany Parish, in most other states they're called counties, and raped her and then executed her. So a guy that did a monstrous thing that led to him being sentenced to death way back when. He's been on death row for a long time, and this was going to be, if it happens, Louisiana's first execution in 15 years. Now, his lawyers are making a commonplace Eighth Amendment argument that it is cruel and unusual punishment to execute him using nitrogen hypoxia as the method, right? I think that's a bit absurd, right? You're killing. There are people that argue that nitrogen hypoxia is painless and it's probably the most humane way, but he still is being executed. They're taking his life because he took someone else's life. There's also a unique argument that because he has become a Buddhist while in custody, that using breathing and meditation is something that Buddhists do on the cusp of death, and that this type of execution will not allow him to do that. It's a violation of his religious rights, which I think is a far more interesting and novel argument, but I also think it's bullcrap, right? And, my feelings on the death penalty are very simple. We know, like here in Texas, we executed a innocent man in Tyrone Willingham. We are aware that there have been other innocent people executed in this country. And while I think people like Jesse Hoffman deserve to die, right? When you think about his victim and her terror, not only being kidnapped and robbed and forced to take her money out of her own account, but then being taken out in some field, raped, and then executed. I don't have any empathy for this man. I think, hey, good, right? But that is predicated on the overwhelming amount of evidence that he committed this crime, not merely the fact that he was convicted, and that he's a monster. Do I think we would probably be better served in America if we just put them in, solitary confinement? Which, of course, Hochul, the governor of New York, just fired a whole bunch of prison workers because they were upset that new woke laws were limiting their ability to put the most violent criminals who are being violent in prisons in solitary confinement. I think that we should have places for monsters like this. But he was sentenced to death. I think it's absurd to say he can't be killed by nitrogen hypoxia. We just had a white man, Brad Sigmund, who monstrously killed his girlfriend who broke up with him. She moved back in with her parents. He went, bashed their heads in, then kidnapped her later when she came home, and she was able to flee. She successfully got away while he was shooting at her. He was captured after a manhunt. This is decades ago. He just took it, firing squad. I don't know if I have a clip for that, but you know what? Good. I don't care. If we're having people sentenced to death who have done these horrible things and we're going to have the death penalty, I don't give a damn how they do it. Hang them, chop off their heads, whatever.
My only concern with the death penalty in America is this. I support the death penalty, but by the same token, I don't support it. And let me be balanced in what I'm about to say here. Too often, the death penalty is only applied to poor, uneducated people in America. You never see rich people who commit heinous crimes, murder, double murder, triple murder, hiring people to assassinate family members, etc. If they're rich, they never get the death penalty. Too often in America, the death penalty is reserved for poor people. Now, in this case, I support it because you don't see his lawyers making or raising any argument that he's innocent of this crime. Now, you kidnapped this woman, took her to an ATM and robbed her. After kidnapping her, then you rape her. Now, I don't give a damn how much gas they give you. I don't care how they lay you on a gurney and then let you get a little gas and you fall asleep and you go to sleep and you die. Why are we more concerned about how humane he dies when the woman that he butchered and raped, we're not talking about that. I believe that in cases like this where there's no question of guilt, for this type of brutal act, they should put the crime scene photos inside the window with him. So as he's dying, he can see them crime scene photos of how you raped and butchered and robbed somebody's daughter. As a father of daughters, you rape and kill one of mine, you gonna die by any means necessary. I don't believe in putting them to sleep and giving them some nice, soft, humane way to die. To hell with that. Where was that level of mercy for the victims?
Well, I mean, I'm a bit shocked by this being your position, Quanell, because just 2 days ago on this same very show, you were outraged that Donald Trump was deporting child rapists and murderers who weren't citizens to El Salvador.
Now, see, there you go, lying again.
No, that's exactly what
Stop
happened.
Stop acting like your ancestors.
That's exactly what happened.
What I said is I did not want him putting people out of the country based on allegations and not having them proved in court. What I want them to have is due process. This man has had all the due process that anyone could have in the state of Louisiana. Okay. This man is not arguing his guilt. What he's arguing is he's a Buddhist. And so now that he's going, Buddha's name be praised. So now I'm supposed to be compassionate about how you die, and you sit there and rape. Can you imagine the terror that that woman must have endured? Why in the hell do I care about how he dies? The only miscarriage of justice in this case, where his innocence has been absolutely proven and not debated by the defendant, the only miscarriage of justice, Charles, is why leave him on death row for 30 or 40 years? Why leave him on death row that long?
One is to exhaust the appeals to hopefully find out if there's any mistakes that have been made, and we have figured that out in America. I mean, famously, we had Michael Morton. He wasn't on death row here, but he was imprisoned. A white man who was accused of and convicted of killing his wife, who a serial killer did it, and they had access to the evidence for years, and they fought testing the evidence for years to cover it up. And finally, the Innocence Project got involved because Mr. Morton kept refusing to be paroled. They said, you need to acknowledge your action and apologize for it, and we'll let you go. And he's like, no, I'm not doing it. I'd rather stay in prison because I didn't do it. And they finally started, and you know, people lost their law license, and so there was a cover-up. People should have went to prison.
People lost their law license.
Yeah, it's horrible.
That's it?
Yeah, it's sad.
Ain't nobody go to jail to the prosecutor's office?
I think that someone had a slight wrist slap.
When you got prosecutors supporting and participating in perjured tesimony and hindering and fabricating evidence, they should go to prison too.
But that's the whole thing, right? We're in this flawed system. And while I think that it is appropriate for the monsters of the United States in some scenarios to get the death penalty, because we know we have a flawed system, and we know that we've killed, right here in Texas, killed an absolutely innocent man, a man who lost his children to a fire and then was prosecuted for burning him to death and executed for it and he did not do it. It's absolutely established he was innocent. We did this to a man, and at that point you have to look at the death penalty, and despite the fact that I want not just justice but vengeance for victims, right? And which isn't the most Christian thing to do, but I can't help myself.
Well, then come on, become a Muslim.
I also recognize
we as Muslims can help you get a better feeling.
And I have far more problems with the Islamic
Why? The Sharia law applies. You don't think this man deserves Sharia law?
No, I think this man deserves to die.
And you don't think Sharia law would help him?
No, I think.
And guess what?
Sharia law
he wouldn't have been on death row for years.
Sharia law is insane.
He would not have been on death row for years.
Violent.
Well, then let me ask you a question.
Any religion that thinks it's okay to kill people that don't believe the religion,
I tell you what,
is a death cult
look
of
at
insanity.
A country, look at any country on earth where they got Sharia law, and look at the rapes. Yeah. Look at the kidnappings.
Well,
look at the robberies in stores. Look at the drive-by shootings in their countries.
That. I don't even know how we got on Sharia, but let's talk about it. Yes, in
you ain't got all them rapes.
And in countries dominated by Sharia law, when women get raped, they're prosecuted for being raped, and many of them are forced to marry their rapists. No, it's not. You lie about your religion all the time. And it's not even your religion.
Cases.
Because most
that has happened in some isolated cases.
There are forced
and
marriages
guess what?
where women go to prison.
Mormons have been convicted of doing the same thing in America.
Hey, look, let's tell the truth, right?
Mormons been convicted doing the same thing in America now.
Most sects of Islam, most Islamists
you ain't
don't
raping in Muslim countries.
The nation
you ain't robbing corner stores
Islam,
in Muslim countries.
Right?
You ain't robbing
now,
cab drivers and Uber drivers in Muslim countries.
Muslims be executed.
Ain't no kidnapping kids in Muslim countries.
The Alawites are being executed.
If you abduct a child, you die.
Okay, absolutely not.
You rape a woman, you die.
That's it for the Face-Off on Fox Soul. We'll catch you next time.